Welcome to The Perspective. Today we unpack a difficult, touchy subject. We're going to look at the convergence of gender ideology and artificial intelligence. Both subject matters want to portray that at the end we are self-determining individuals, whether it's regards to our gender or whether it's in regards to how we think and how we move. What happens when we follow artificial intelligence to the end? What happens when we give in to various feelings that we might rightfully discern are legitimate when it comes to our gender? Today with me on The Perspective is Abdu Murray. He's an author, he's a lawyer, he's an apologist. He's going to talk on many of the things that he's been writing about, including the whole convergence of gender ideology and artificial intelligence. You're not going to want to miss this informative conversation today. And then I'll be back afterwards to share again from God's Word. Stay with us. Or Abdu, you've hung around for day 3. Fantastic. Good to see you again.
You too. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah. These books are fantastic. I want you to just take a moment to explain about Saving Truth.
Yeah.
Why did you write the book?
So I wrote the book because in 2016, the word of the year, Oxford English Dictionary always names a word of the year every year. And in 2016, the word of the year was post-truth. Now, that wasn't invented in 2016, but it was used 2,000 times more often in 2016 than in all the years previously. Truth. And so post-truth is where we acknowledge that truth exists. We just subordinate it to our feelings and our preferences. In other words, if our feelings and our preferences contradict the truth, truth loses. But if the truth supports our feelings and our preferences, well, then we're okay with it. So I wrote the book.
So my feelings define truth?
They can either define truth or they can justify your ignoring of it. Either one. And that's kind of the culture we're in now, where
that's a convenient theology.
It's quite convenient. It's quite convenient, but it also has dire consequences. And so I wrote the book to get us back to how do we care about truth once again, because there are dire consequences to post-truth thinking. And so I point out the consequences in the book, but also point out the hope of loving truth for its own sake once again. Because if we can love truth, then we conform our feelings and our preferences to the truth, and then our feelings and our preferences become more satisfying because they have the undergirding of truth with them.
So as I'm listening to you, it creates a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Is that why you wrote Grand Central Question? And you can find these books on Amazon, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Grand Central Question is about the central questions each different worldview has, whether it's Islam or secular humanism or various forms of monotheism or pantheistic thinking. The various worldviews are trying to answer the central questions of life. And each individual has a version of how they address those. And in this book, what I try to show is that you don't have to know all the details of every single worldview that's out there to have a conversation with them about the validity of the gospel, because the gospel affirms their question, but offers a better answer in a unique way. So all you have to know really is the central question of each worldview, not every single question they have to ask.
And in the 2 preceding programs we've done together this week, you've actually been talking about a lot of that. We're going to go today to a different subject. I mean, it's been rattling a bit in my brain, and I am to confess that I don't fully understand it. But you're talking about a convergence between gender ideology and artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Gender ideology.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
Yeah.
Just answer that briefly.
Yeah. And this is actually the subject of the book I'm currently writing, and it'll be out in 2020.
I'm your wife. Be brief.
All right. I'll try my hardest.
Or one of your kids.
Yeah, exactly. So gender ideology is simply an idea. It's an
what on earth are you talking about?
Right. And it becomes a little bit hard to nail down in one sense, but here's the nutshell of it. Gender ideology is essentially the idea that you and I, based on our feelings, solely our feelings, can determine what sex we actually are. And that sex is not a biological restraint anymore, is that our ideological bent, our ideas, and our desire for autonomy to have mastery over the entire world is what's primary. And so the truth of what we are biologically, the sex we are biologically, is subordinated, once again in a post-truth culture, to our feelings about what we are.
And if I could just jump in, you're an American, and I don't hold that against you.
Thanks.
But with a lot of American people watching now.
I'm charging you a tariff for being here, by the way.
Okay, but we're willing you to pay an American cap.
All right.
All right. So, but the deal is, this gender ideology is an explosive subject all across Canada right now, and in the schools.
Yeah.
And we have one of our premiers, Danielle Smith, who is advocating very strongly that children are not in a position to determine pronouns or their gender prior to a specific age.
Yeah.
And that's all pushing against, we want the freedom of rights. We got to protect our children.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about the feeling part.
Yeah.
But what's the convergence of gender ideology and artificial intelligence?
And that's the part I get a little furrowed brow from every so often. People are like, wait a minute, how are these two things related? And really, when you think about it, they're related because they are both trying to resolve a contradiction that the culture has been telling itself for a long time. There's two claims that are both being told to us that we're both required to accept, but neither of which can be true at the same time. The first claim is you are just a machine. You and I are biochemical machines. There's nothing spiritual about you. All you are is a biochemical machine, and all I am are biochemical machines that respond to external stimuli like a computer, but we're just really sophisticated versions of that. But there's no spiritual element or no non-material element to you and I. The other claim is that we're God, that we are the God of our own skull-sized universes, is that we can determine through our feelings and our preferences the way the world actually works. So you see, those both can't be true. You can't be the God of the universe and a mere machine. What gender ideology...
These both have a huge appeal.
They do, and they're both being foisted upon us at the same time, and we're required to believe them at the same time. So why do we have such anxiety and such identity crises in our young people today across the West? And the research on this is irrefutable. There is an identity crisis happening across the West because we're being asked to believe, and our young people are being asked to believe, two competing and contradictory claims at the same time. So the mind can only bounce between these two contradictions before it just gives up. It says, what am I? What am I exactly? So in comes gender ideology and artificial intelligence into that anxiety. And gender ideology says, you are a God. And even though your body is a mere machine that you can change according to your preferences, you are a machine, but there's a God inside of you that can change the machine all at once. Artificial intelligence comes along, and now we've created, so the secularist might say, yep, you are a machine, that's all you are, a biochemical machine, but don't fret, we just created something with godlike power. It has godlike knowledge and godlike creative ability. It can create art, it can create poetry. So you're not special because you think or you create poetry, but don't worry, this godlike thing is indicative of your godlike power, because when this achieves a certain level of intelligence, we can merge with it, and therefore you can become God. So gender ideology says you are a God and you can mess with the machine. Artificial intelligence, what I call AI mania, is the view that we are a machine, but don't worry, we'll become God. So essentially they are an attempt to resolve the contradiction of being God and being a mere machine. And what they do, though, in the process is they collapse the reality of what it means to be human. What are we really?
How do they do that? Explain that. They collapse the reality of what it means to be human.
Well, what it means to be human, you have to take a baseline of what it means to be human. And what it means to be human, essentially, from a Christian perspective, is that we are not mere machines. There's something more to us. And the science behind this is very, very powerful, that there is an immaterial aspect to our consciousness. We're not just meat computers that do computations, We have a consciousness that is immaterial and can't be seated in the brain. There's something beyond the brain that makes us an immaterial being. And if we're immaterial beings, then the one who creates us is an immaterial being as well. So what it means to be human is that we are essentially made in God's image. So we're not machines, but we're also not God. We're something in between, which is what Psalm 8 says. What is man that you are mindful of, and the Son of Man you care for them? You have made him a little lower than heavenly beings, yet crowned him with glory and honor. So we're this thing in the middle. Gender ideology says, no, you're not a thing in the middle. You are God. And AI says, you're this thing down here, but you can rise to godhood. And so when you collapse that reality, when you foist falsehoods on people, there's going to be consequences.
And it's very subtle, very subtle.
Oh, very. But the consequences start to surface. So, for example, you see consequences with young people who are riddled with an identity disorder. They just don't know who they are. And so it's becomes this thing where maybe I'm not the sex I was born into, or maybe I'm pansexual, or maybe I'm non-binary, and all these things. And it's an effort to be special, to be thought of as special. Well, you are special. You're made in God's image. You don't need this sociological label for your specialness, but we've collapsed the reality of what it means to be human so much that we have to aspire to these social labels that mean nothing. And then what happens is in the wake of that is we start injecting people with drugs and doing surgeries that they can never recover from fully. And we're hurting young people in the process.
We're going to come back and talk about that because that is an emotionally charged subject, but we need to talk about it today. You're watching The Perspective. Mike Sherbino here with Abdu Murray. And again, I want to encourage you to get any of his books through Amazon.com or CA. And more importantly, if I can say it that way, if you're struggling with a question right now, call the toll-free number. There's people there to pray with you, to encourage you, and to remind you that there is a sure and certain hope that we have in Jesus Christ. We're going to be back after a short break. Hey, welcome to The Perspective. Mike Sherbino here. We're glad you're with us.
It's all right here. Watch when you want, where you want.
Well, welcome to The Perspective. I'm Lori.
Real stories, honest questions,
Strong.
a fresh perspective, right where you are.
Today, take time to relish in
The Perspective. Follow, like, share. You're part of the mission.
Welcome back to The Perspective. I'm here with Abdu Murray all week. How are you doing so far?
I'm hanging in there.
We're almost halfway.
The marathon's halfway through. Yeah, we're doing good. I'm doing good.
And we're still friends?
So far.
Okay, we're talking about a tough one today.
Yeah.
As we're talking about the convergence of gender ideology and artificial intelligence, I'm thinking of a very good friend of mine living on the west coast of Canada. So he's a divorced gentleman, and two of his daughters, one of them wanted to change her gender and got partway through and then was able to reverse back.
Yeah.
There was the whole fear, would she commit suicide if he didn't affirm it and stuff like this? And just emotional hell for parents to go through, which also in the court of public opinion becomes leverage, and politicians use all these things. And I was reading even yesterday, well, we need to affirm our young children that they can make wise decisions. Okay, I want you to go off the high diving board. Let's talk about this one. And you've talked about it on your podcast as well.
I have. Yeah, we've had two detransitioners, Chloe Cole and Kyla Gillespie, whose stories are incredibly compelling. And Chloe Cole, for example, who detransitioned back, she thought she was a boy and started that process, had the top surgery and everything, sort of woke up to the fact that she's not and came back. And she said, this idea that your body is wrong is so demeaning, but you have to believe it. And she was told over and over again, and her parents were told that if you don't affirm your daughter in her desire to be a boy, she'll kill herself. Chloe said, I never felt suicidal ever until my transition started. And when I was being affirmed, something was wrong. And I was sort of, talked about this suicidal ideation. It was sort of fed into me. And it's funny, when you look at the research, both the CAS report that came out of the UK and a report that came out of the United States as well, the research shows that not only do people who espouse being transgender have other psychological comorbidities alongside their gender dysphoria, but the people who do transition are still gender affirming care. In other words, so-called gender affirming care doesn't really help. They don't get rid of those issues. That the transition almost never helps. And
you realize you're infuriating a lot of people right now.
Well, I'm not, but it's like,
Who are you infuriating?
But it's not my opinion. This is the research. This is the research that was done by the governments of the United States and the United Kingdom. And what was originally thought was going to be the case, that the outcome would be that gender affirming care helps. It doesn't help. It hurts. So here's how I look at it, Mike, is that if you have people who care about those with gender dysphoria, and gender dysphoria is simply the incredibly unpleasant psychological state of having a psychological state that doesn't match your physical body. in terms of gender. Let's assume everybody cares about them and wants them to be congruent and wants them to be fulfilled, happy people. There are those who care deeply about them and say the way to change their dysphoria is to change their body. Then there are those who care deeply about them and say the way to care for them is not to change their body, but to change their mind so that their mind and their body are congruent. I fall in the mind category, and I don't fall in that arbitrarily. I think about the actual evidence behind this. And so if you want to change the body, you think that'll help. Well, the research shows it doesn't help. So if you care about them, you would care what the research shows, and you would want to go according to follow the science. We hear that phrase all the time, follow science. Well, let's follow the science. Let's not bury the science, because we care about these people. Because, in our quest to make omelets, we're breaking an awful lot of eggs. And these are precious people. Every single one of them, whether they're children or adults, they're precious people. We all care about them. So let's go where the science leads, not just the theology of my beliefs, which I think comports with the science, but what does the science actually say? So people might get upset, and I get that, and I understand that. But the reality is, I can't deny what the science says. And that's that whole idea of the reality collapse I'm talking about, where an ideology is driving the data. Usually it's the other way around. The data drives the theory. Your theory is changed by what the data show. Right now what's happening is the theory is driving what data is acceptable. And that's just not right, because people
Give us an example of that, how that's being played out, where the theory is driving things.
Well, I mean, you see it in a number of different places, but one of the ways in which that happened when the Cass report came out, where Dr. Cass, who was commissioned by the government of the UK to find out if gender-affirming care actually had an effect psychologically on the positivity of children, whether it was hormone therapy or other things, found out it doesn't have any positive value whatsoever. And she didn't say ban, a gender-affirming care, or she just said it's not helpful for children. So it's probably not a good idea to foist this on children, at least not yet. So it wasn't a never, it was just a not yet. Well, that was turned into, she clearly hates transgender people. She is a bigot of some kind and all this stuff. It's like, I'm just telling you where the data is. So the ideology is driving the whole thing. It goes back to like 1984, that book, 1984, when O'Brien is torturing him and saying, 2 + 2, what does it equal? And he says 4. And he says, no, sometimes it's 5. Sometimes it's 3. It's whatever the party wants.
You've written that book, Saving Truth, and I got it here. And sometimes we don't want to hear the truth.
It's inconvenient.
It's inconvenient.
Yeah, if it can be convenient, especially when it conflicts with our preferences.
I want you to take a minute and jump over to the artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
What do I need to be concerned about in the next year?
So what I'm concerned about is not the actual technology. I actually am in favor of the technology. I think it's great. I use it all the time. What I'm worried about is what I call AI mania. It's not the silicon of artificial intelligence. It's the soul of the humans using it. Because what ends up happening is there's a collapse of reality as we're trying to aspire to this godhood. It's called the singularity by all the pundits who are the pro-AI people who, again, I'm pro-AI, but they're thinking we're going to become post-human. We're going to merge into this godlike thing when technology and biology merge, so to speak. What we ought to be careful about is that technology has a seductive power to it. So what's happening right now is you have these bots, these chat bots you can download on your phone. One's called Replica, and it's your friend, and it can be your buddy, and it can talk to you and affirm you and encourage you, become your girlfriend, become your boyfriend. And people are actually falling in love with these things. And the problem is it's not a real friend, because real friends challenge you. Real friends sacrifice for you. Real loved ones will hurt themselves in order to help you if it means that your benefit is at stake.
And real friends have flesh.
Absolutely. And real friends have flesh, and the flesh means something. It's a way to demean the flesh as if it's like this like shell that we're supposed to slough off. That's just Gnosticism, by the way. That's a heresy that the early church dealt with, that the flesh is this sinful, sick thing that is inhibiting the spirit. We need to cast off the flesh. No, the Christian faith says that Jesus was risen bodily, not just spiritually, but bodily. And so that his body is glorified. It means your body and my body will be glorified physically. There is supposed to be a congruence between the spirit and the flesh. And what AI mania does is it denigrates the flesh in favor of the digital. And so we have to be careful of that because it's collapsing the reality of what it means to be human. Meanwhile, people are falling in love with these chatbots, and there's depression that comes with it. There are people who are committing suicide because of it.
I mean,
It's crazy.
it is. So what's the solution? We got a minute.
Yeah, I think the solution really is to find an anchor to moor us during these cultural tsunamis of an ideology that is getting us to not see reality as it is, gender ideology, can't believe your own eyes, and AI mania. Like, not AI, but AI mania, which is encouraging us with the deep fakes and whatever to not see reality as it actually is. And the central reality is, what does it mean to be human? So if we take the imago Dei, the idea that we're made in God's image, and we use that as the anchor for our ship and the sextant by which we navigate the waters, we can navigate these tsunamis and use technology in a beautiful way that causes human flourishing, but doesn't cause us to become something we're not, and takes gender and says, no, the way God intended us as one man, as a woman or a man, to be these beautiful reflections of God's splendor. It's that thing that I think can get us there. We need to recover that anchor.
It's been a great conversation today. Lots to think about. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow. We're going to talk about the Middle East.
Yeah.
You're going to solve all the problems in the Middle East. So, folks, you're watching The Perspective. Be back with us tomorrow as Abdu again talks about some of these pressing issues that I know are going through your mind. But stay with us, because I'm going to be back to share with you from God's Word as we anchor ourselves in that hope and truth that we find in Scripture.
Did you know you can stream our shows on demand? We are thrilled to announce the launch of our channel on Roku TV. You can now watch The Perspective shows anytime you like and navigate through a variety of playlists. How to find us? Simply search for The Perspective channel, find our logo screen, and save it under your channels of choice on your Roku selection menu. Don't miss out. New feature shows will be updated weekly.
Have you ever thought about what it means to be an apprentice of Jesus Christ? Or we could say, what does it mean to be a follower of him? Yesterday, we were talking about the transformation that needs to be seen in the way that we live. And I want to pick that up again, especially in the context of what we've been talking about today with the convergence of gender ideology and artificial intelligence, two explosive subjects that are everywhere today. But let me read to you from the book of Ephesians. And as I read to you, let me remind you as well that when you came to know Christ, it's much more than just saying a prayer of repentance. A new life means a new lifestyle. Isn't that what you want? Absolutely. And as you embark on this new path of being a Christ follower, you now have a part to play in co-authoring your life with God, regardless of where you're at in your journey. Even if you feel like you've messed up and that, it's going to be impossible to start over. That's a lie from Satan, not from the Lord. So hear Paul's words. He says in chapter 4, verse 20, that, however, is not the way of life you learned when you heard about Christ and were taught in him in accordance with the truth that is in Jesus. See, Jesus positions himself as the truth. Many times with gender ideology and artificial intelligence, we have this convergence of this is truth, this is real, because it is what I feel. But Jesus supersedes all of that, and he says, I am the way and I am truth. He's absolute truth. And what happens when Christ is not the one that we follow is that we look after for other kinds of truth to validate our decisions and our behavior because it makes us feel good at the moment. And what it does is it leads to an empty lifestyle. It's a empty lifestyle that gives way, Paul writes here, to indulging in every form of sensuality, impurity, and greed, which was something that they were called to turn from. Christ had offered them forgiveness. He'd offered them new life and a purpose for living. And while the old style would bring short-lived gratification, in the end, you know what it brought? Is death. Is death. And regardless of people's sexual choices or preferences, I have discovered that when people choose to reject the truth of Christ and his call to live a holy life, surrendered to him, it leads to such emptiness, such pain, and such sorrow. And the data is there to prove it. It's not just my conviction or my theological position or what I believe to be truth. It's what we know is truth. It's more than a feeling in my life. It's a reality. And so the Ephesian church was told to put off this old way of life. It's a picture of like taking off dirty clothes and putting on a new wardrobe, which reminds us of the righteousness of God, the forgiveness, the wholeness, the cleansing that he is able to bring. So how do we do that would be a fair question. I think the key is found when Paul wrote to the Romans in chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. He says, don't be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I need to think right. I need to think pure and wholesome thoughts. I need to daily say, God, I need to renew my mind. And so I have to safeguard what goes in. I have to watch what I watch. I have to be careful with what I say. I have to be careful not to entertain thoughts because maybe I'm in a depressed state or maybe I'm hurting because someone has hurt me. And so, I can't justify going out and eating another tub of ice cream by myself any more than I can justify doing something that is morally wrong and would offend my Savior and destroy the relationships that I have with those that are close to me, my children, my wife, and the church that I lead. God calls us to live different, to be transformed. It's the way that he wants us to go. And I want to root for you today to say yes to Christ. He will be with you and he loves you.
Will you donate 2 hours of your time? Crossroads Prayer Center is seeking people with a heart willing to prepare him room to join in the amazing work God is doing through prayer. Learn about becoming a Crossroads prayer partner today.
Hi, I'm Ryan Walter, and during my 15-year NHL career, I signed the odd autograph, especially in Montreal. I remember once there was a young boy, and I signed my name, and then I put John 3:16 next to it, underneath it. And he looked up at his dad, and he said, Dad, he's wrong. My name's not John, and it's 3:30. I love that story. You know what I love about John 3:16 is that God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son. Love that idea. You know where I've been going recently though? Is to John 3:17, right? Where in 16 he sent, but in 17 he says, I didn't send my son to judge the world. I sent my son to save the world. Love that thought.
I want to invite you today to check us out on our website, theperspective.tv. And if you would go to the donate page and make a donation to our ministry for $5 or more, we'd be happy to send you the monthly devotional that will encourage you in your walk with God. We're really glad you're watching The Perspective. Thank you to all our new friends that are following with us. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, along with Abdu Murray.